Yeah, and what I would say that I agree with what you're saying about our understanding being perfected, and that some of our understanding would be yet to be ironed out. But what I will say is, in 1 Corinthians 13, Paul's not talking about us not being able to know ourselves if we've always been known now. He says, when I was a child, when I was under legalism, I saw through a glass darkly lit. I didn't know myself as I'd always been known by God. But he says, now that I'm a man, I've seen myself in the face of Jesus, and I know even as I've always been known. And now that which is perfect has come, which is love. Right? So Paul's not teaching that we're condemned to a life of seeing through a glass darkly lit. Right? You can't actually see through a glass darkly lit if you've beheld yourself in the face of Jesus. Right? If you've seen yourself in the face of Jesus, you're not looking through a glass darkly lit. You're looking at yourself in the face of Jesus as if you're looking in a mirror. Does that make sense? I just don't want anybody to walk away with the wrong interpretation of that verse. I agree with what you're saying, but I just wanted to clarify, because Paul talked about how he had full knowledge in the mystery of Christ. And so Paul was not teaching about how he lacked knowledge. Paul even said he was caught up to the third heaven. The third heaven is the throne room. And so if Paul was caught up to the third heaven and he was in the throne room, guess what he saw there? God and Jesus face to face. So Paul was not teaching about how, well, when we're in this earth, we're condemned to seeing through a glass darkly lit. And then when we can die, then we can know ourselves even as we've always been known. No. If you read the context there, Paul is saying, when I was a child, I saw through a glass darkly lit. But now that I've become a man, I know myself even as I've always been known by God. And because of that, that which is perfect has come, which is love. That's why he talks about love, the whole first part of that chapter. That which is perfect coming isn't talking about the return of Jesus. It's talking about love. Notice how he says love never fails. If love never fails, guess what's perfect? Love. He was chastising the Corinthians because the Corinthians were gathering together thinking it was all about their spiritual gifts. It was all about standing up, playing in tongues. It was all about what gift they could do. It was all about all these things. And Paul comes and says, listen, man, it ain't about that. All those things can fail you. How do we know? Y'all come together and pray in tongues all out loud, and none of you are loving each other. And so he starts talking about when he was immature and a child, he thought those things were the thing. But he saw through a glass darkly lit. He says now that he's a man and he knows himself as he's always been known by God, and he sees the love of God, that which is perfect, born in him, and he sees how that love has never failed in any situation. Right? That's the context there of what he's talking about. So Linda, yes, I agree with what you're saying. I just want that verse to be clear for anybody listening going forward.
Well, the proof of that is that Jesus had a perfect understanding of what he is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he had no Spirit. We have the same Holy Spirit.
Yeah. And that's a passionate point for me, because one of the things that God did to me before he started showing me things was he had me crumple up this idea that I couldn't really know him or myself, and that it was in the sweet by and by. That's one of the first things he had me come and throw in the garbage can. Not that I was going to try to labor to get understanding, but that was a stumbling block for me, right? For what he wanted to show me. So if you've seen yourself in the face of Jesus, you know yourself as you've always been known. If you know yourself as a son or daughter of God, and you're knowing yourself the way Jesus knew himself when he walked the earth, you're not seeing through a glass darkly lit. If you know that the life you possess is the life of the Son, and that life is an incorruptible life, and that life will raise you up from this world and clothe you in glory and immortality, you're not seeing through a glass darkly lit. You're knowing yourself as you've always been known.
Which kind of goes back to the idea of the internet church we were talking about at the beginning. You can know other members of the church through that medium, but to be with them in person is even better.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Does that make any sense? Does everybody follow that? I encourage everybody, go back and read. So many times we don't look at the context of why he says what he says. We just look at what he says. But the context there is the Corinthians were coming together. They weren't loving each other. They all wanted to show themselves to be good by their gift. Look at me, I can pray in tongues. Look at me, I can give a prophecy. Look at me, I can lay hands on the sick. And Paul, he doesn't say that those things are worthless, but he says in comparison to the love of God, those things are very secondary. And then he goes into the whole thing about love this, love that. Then he says love never fails. He says whether there be a prophecy or whether there be a tongue. Listen, man, those things can fail. If I can speak with the tongue of angels and God, listen, man, that can't cause me to be able to minister the love of God to somebody else. If I come into a room and start praying in tongues, how is that going to bless anybody with the love of God? They can't understand what I'm saying. How can an unbeliever walk in and hear us all praying in tongues and experience the love of God? Do you see how our much speaking in tongues could fail in that situation? Yeah. Because they could walk in and think we're all a bunch of wine bibbers. And that we're drunk on the wine, even though it's 10 in the morning. Right? You see how the tongues could fail in that situation. But if we could know ourselves as we've always been known by God, and we see ourselves in the face of Jesus, we'll begin knowing them the way they've always been known by God. That will cause something to manifest in us called the love of God. And then all those things that 1 Corinthians 13 describes that love will do will come out of us towards people, and that can never fail. Even should they reject us, it won't fail. Because love will then pray for them while they're cursing us. Love will then prefer their life over our own life. Love didn't fail in Christ. When Christ was hanging on the cross, did he pray in tongues? Was it the tongues that he thought would help the whole situation? Do you see how love manifested in Jesus on the cross, and he prayed for those that were despitefully using him? That he blessed those who were cursing him? Do you see how love didn't fail there? If Jesus had just prayed in tongues there, though, how would that have impacted the people sitting around? I mean, look at the centurion. Who knows how many people went off and got saved because of the centurion's experience where he hears Jesus praying for the people who are killing him and then hears him cry out, Father, into your hand. What does the centurion say? Truly, this is a righteous man. You think he was touched by the love that came out of Jesus? You think he kept that to himself? Or do you think he went home and told all his Roman friends, that guy was praying for people while they nailed him to a cross? Listen, man, that can only be because of God. He must be the Son of God. Do you see how love didn't fail in that situation? So Paul is trying to explain this supremacy of love manifesting in us over the spiritual gifts. Right? He's putting it in a pecking order. It's not that the gifts are evil or bad, but he's saying, you guys, listen, you kind of made that the point, but the point is really the love of God being born in you. Because that love will never fail in any situation. Right? And that's kind of what he's talking about. When it says that when that which is perfect is come, he's talking about love. He's not talking about when Jesus comes back there. When he's talking about seeing it through a glass darkly lit, he's talking about before you see yourself in the face of Jesus. Right? When he was immature, he didn't see. But now that he's a man and he's knowing himself as he's always been known, that which is perfect has manifested in him. It's called love. And he sees that the greatest miracle that could ever happen is the love of God being born in somebody, not whether he can pray in tongues or not. Right? Does everybody understand what I'm saying? We're not saying the gifts are evil. I can't say how many times I put these things in their proper pecking order and people come and say that I said they were evil or bad. We're not saying the gifts are evil or bad. But what we're saying is the thing that is the most powerful thing is the love of God to be born in your heart, where you find the peace and the love and the joy and the kindness and the meekness and the faithfulness of God born in you, because that won't fail in any situation. Right? Listen, my tongues, I mean... we'll just stop there. I won't go on any further.